Hey spicy food fans, this is Mike from Wicked Cactus Sauce coming to show you another video of how to cook with super hot peppers. This time around the pepper that I am featuring, it is the Yellow Bhut. Now I picked up these peppers from seed from refiningfirechilies.com, the best source on the internet to get your super hot and specialty pepper seeds. Now these Yellow Bhut, these have a similar flavor to the red Bhut. The only difference really is the color, but they are really beautiful peppers. They've got an incredible amount of heat, a little tiny bit of citrus note to them, and an underscore of smoke. So we're going to help accentuate that by doing these in a dry rub and marinade on a beef brisket that we are going to slow smoke over charcoal and wood. So let's get started with preparing our brisket. So as you can see here, our Yellow Bhut. These are very good in their fresh state, but I have dried some out, gone ahead and dehydrated a handful of them, and then I've gone ahead and powdered up some so that we can use them in our dry rub and in our marinade. Now the big thing here with our brisket, this is just a brisket flat. I didn't go for the full brisket, mainly out of cost reasons and because I'm the only one who's going to be brave enough to eat this spicy beast. What we really need to do with this first, we need to go ahead and trim off a lot of this fat, because this fat is going to be a barrier to our marinade, our dry rub, and that smoke that we're going to put on this. Too much fat, not enough flavor is going to get into that meat, and we're going to be left with a pretty bland piece of brisket. So let me go ahead and get started here. I'm going to go ahead and trim this out. Well, as we can see here, most of the fat has been peeled away from our brisket, but we're still left with a little bit of this silver skin. So I just want to take my paring knife and real gently make sure I get all the way underneath there to get all of that up so that the marinade and the dry rub can really penetrate that meat. So I've gone ahead and removed all the silver skin and the fat from our brisket. So let's get ready and prepare our marinade. So to get started, got about 1.5 cups of hot water. To that I'm going to add 1 big heaping teaspoon of beef broth. Mix that in until it gets nice and dissolved. Right, there we go. I'm also going to add 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire, 1 tablespoon of soy, just a dash of regular salt, and then I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of teaspoons of the Yellow Bhut that I have dehydrated and then ground into a powder. We're also going to utilize some of this in our dry rub as well. All right. Get that all nicely marinated. In order to help speed this process along, I brought out my vacuum sealer with my vacuum seal bag. I'm going to go ahead and get this brisket set in there, pour the marinade in on top, and get this back in the fridge. We'll let this marinade go overnight, and we should be ready to rock and roll tomorrow morning. So my brisket has been sealed up, ready to marinate. It's about 2:30 in the afternoon right now, so this will get a good 16 hours before we start cooking tomorrow morning. Now I'm going to get started on the dry rub, starting here with about 1.5 tablespoons of brown sugar. To that I am adding 3 tablespoons of paprika, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 tablespoon of salt, 1 tablespoon of garlic powder, 1 tablespoon of black pepper, 1 teaspoon of dried oregano, and 1 teaspoon of cumin. And then of course, can't forget the star of the show here, those yellow Bhut jolokias. So this is going to be everything that I had left in that ground up bit. This is about 1 tablespoon or so. I'm going to seal this up. Give this a nice mix, and then tomorrow we'll be ready to cook. It's about 9:30. Yesterday, after I finished trimming up the brisket, I went inside and weighed it out. It came in at about 4.5 pounds, which I figure will need about 6 hours worth of good smoking time. So in order to do that, I'm going to use my ugly drum smoker. And what I have here is I have my fire basket. Now this is filled with about 10 pounds worth of charcoal and some big, fat cherry wood chunks. I'm going to set this down inside my smoker. I've got a chimney with about 15-20 screaming hot coals. Just drop those right on top. Now what will happen, those coals, as they heat up and burn down, they'll continue to burn down through that layer of wood and charcoal, giving me a nice even heat throughout my entire smoke. So I have my smoker coming up to temperature. Now it's time to go ahead and apply that dry rub that we made to our brisket. First step here, I'm going to go ahead and open up my brisket, and I'm going to reserve the marinade liquid. The reason I'm going to reserve this, we took off all the fat, and without something to braise this brisket with, it might come out really, really dry. So what I'm doing is I'm reserving about a cup of that liquid, and we'll add that back in later on. Set the reserved marinade to the side, and now I have a pan here with some paper towels. I'm going to towel off this brisket, get it nice and dry, so we can apply that dry rub. You can see all those great Bhut jolokia flakes on there. And what I want to do with my dry rub, I want to reserve a little bit of this, but I am going to put quite a generous portion on there. I want to make sure that really gets patted down into the meat. Get a little more on there. Flip it over and get the back side. And I've reserved about half of it. We'll add that back in later on. All right, time to get this on the smoker. Okay, so it's been a good couple of hours here. It's about noon. The internal temperature of our brisket's gotten up to about 165. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to transfer the brisket into an aluminum foil pan. I'm going to add to that brisket the reserved liquid from the marinade. I'm also going to add to it the remainder of our dry rub. Sprinkle that back over the top. Maybe not all of it. I'll reserve just a tiny bit just for a little bit of garnish at the end. And then what I'll do is I will place a lid here, and what we're going to do is we're going to steam this until the internal temperature of that brisket, we're at 165 now. We're going to bring this all the way up to about 200 degrees. So let me put this back on the smoker. We continue to wait. It's now approximately 2 o'clock. And the internal temperature of my brisket's gone up to about 195 degrees. And you can see a lot of that juice is, a lot of the remaining fat is rendered out. And a lot of that juice is still left in there. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to leave this with the lid on, slightly cracked, for about 15 minutes to let it vent. And then we're going to hold it for about another half hour, 45 minutes, to allow some of those juices to reabsorb and get back in that meat. I've allowed my brisket to rest so it reabsorbs some of those juices, and I've gone ahead and sliced up a couple of pieces here just so you can see. Slow smoking, this brisket comes out super tender. The slow smoking helps tame some of that overwhelming heat that you can get from those Bhut Jolokias. And again, to get these peppers from seed, your best source is refiningfirechilies.com. So from Mike from Wicked Cactus Sauce and from Jim Duffy from Refining Fire Chilies, see you next time.